Hi, everyone. This is Lawrence Watkins, and welcome to the Financial Juneteenth 5. These are my 5 favorite articles as it relates to Black finance, wealth, and business for today, October 22nd, 2020. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so our lead story today comes from vulture.com. And it states Shonda Rhimes left ABC for Netflix after a Disneyland ticket snub. Shonda Rhimes signed a mega deal with Netflix about 3 years ago for, I believe it was 300 million plus dollars. And she was a longtime showrunner and the most popular showrunner for ABC, which is owned by Disney. So she recently did an interview, Shonda did, with THR. So it states, speaking with THR about her decision to switch from her creative home for 15 years, ABC, to the streaming service, Rhimes revealed that the pace and constraints of network television had become too stringent for her life. I felt like I was dying, she stated. I'd been pushing the same ball up the same hill in the exact same way for a really long time. So, yeah, so that was, I guess, a long time, coming, but she had a breaking point, and the breaking point came in 2017 as well. So it states, rather in 2017, Rhimes asked for an additional all-inclusive pass to Disneyland, one of her perks for working at the House of Mouse owned network, to give to her visiting sister. After receiving some pushback, she was told repeatedly, we never do this. Rhimes got the pass, but it failed to work when her sister, with her children and nanny, arrived at the park. Rhimes proceeded to call a high ranking executive at the company to figure out the issue, but he showed no interest in giving television's most prominent showrunner a $154 ticket to the park. Don't you have enough? He allegedly responded. Rhimes collected herself, hung up, and called her lawyer with a simple directive. She was going to move to Netflix and she'd find new representatives if that couldn't be accomplished. And of course, the deal was worth $300 million, and the rest is history. So I take a couple of different lessons from this article. One is just the interpersonal relationships and the interpersonal dynamics as it relates to negotiations. And how different sides may feel. So in this case, Shonda Rhimes felt snubbed, like she wasn't appreciated by ABC, and I'm sure ABC felt some type of way of Shonda, continue to ask for more and more as well. So it just shows interpersonal skills of interpersonal relationships when people are going through negotiations. And also, Shonda knew her worth. She knew that she wanted to go to a place that gave her more creative freedom, and also she wanted to feel appreciated as well. So I just found this article to be interesting from a business perspective, because all the time it's not always about just the dollar bills that one gets when they sign a new contract, but other things matter too, like creative freedom, how much people appreciate you at your current company as well. So shout out to Shonda Rhimes. Looking forward to checking out her new show on Netflix coming soon. The second article today comes from Fast Company. And Fast Company, of course, is an entrepreneurial website. And it states, this is how big tech is failing its Black employees. Lofty promises by large corporations only skim the surface of big tech's problems with educating and recruiting diverse talent. So the article is written by a person by the name of Michael Ellison. He is the CEO of a company or nonprofit called CodePath. And he's a Black man, I believe, also from Maine. So I don't know if I knew many Black men from Maine, but he's talking about text diversity problems and how right now he thinks that we're going through a repeat of text progression from 2014. So the article states the share of technical workers who are Black at Facebook, Google, and Microsoft has inched up less than 1 percentage point since 2014 and still sits below 4% at each company. Large companies are lining up to announce new diversity pledges, and it genuinely seems like many leaders want to change. The last few months have forced systemic racism into the sightline of business leaders, and companies are also finding that diversity is good for their bottom line. Here's the problem: they also know that they're probably going to come up short again. The root cause is not just the low number of black students who are trained in software engineering, which makes up about 6% of all computer science graduates. The problem comes down to our whole system for training, finding, and retaining underrepresented engineers. He goes on to state, finally, few black engineers who make it past those barriers feel isolated in an industry that relies so heavily on personal connections. Yeah. So I find this to be interesting. This quote is very telling as well, talking about what the actual problem is. The problem is not that black kids aren't smart or determined enough, and the problem isn't failing to identify the hidden gems with untapped potential. The problem is that the system was not built for us, and that's something that we talk about often within the Black Business School and also the Financial Juneteenth channel. Is that the system wasn't really built for us, so we're always skeptical of diversity types of programs, although they may benefit the Black community in the short term. Long term, we wonder, if that type of way of looking at the world is going to be sustainable, given the fact that since 1970 we haven't really made much progress as a collective community as it relates to the percentage of wealth that Black Americans actually own in the United States. The article goes on to state, all this means that for the latest round of diversity initiatives to have any hope of succeeding, tech companies have to rebuild the pipeline. They should start early, channeling their massive lobbying and funding power to ensure that every student has access to quality computer science courses before graduating high school. And to end the article, Michael states, it's time we stop asking for diverse companies and start asking for equitable pipeline, recognizing that diversity will follow. It's time that companies stop looking for ways to compete over a few hundred industry-ready Black software engineers graduating each year and start figuring out how to train the next million Black software engineers. So if you want to read more about this article, please head over to fastcompany.com. This article was released, actually, I'm not sure, yesterday. So yesterday morning. So please check that out. The next article that I want to talk about today comes from theguardian.com. So The Guardian is a UK-based website, but this article is actually from someone who is from the United States. Her name is Nakia Hargrove. The article is entitled, Credit Cards Helped My Black Grandparents Buy Everything Until They Didn't. So she gives a story. She was a 90s child, so I think we're about the same age. She gives a story of going shopping as a child with her grandmother, and the annual back to school shopping where you get backpacks and new clothes and that type of thing. And in moments like that, she felt really rich, but she didn't really understand that her grandmother was putting all of the clothes and things that they were buying for school on a credit card. So a quote here from from her grandmother. My credit card has a limit. She reminded me gently at the register in her soft, patient voice, but I never learned what it was. Nakia goes on to state in this paragraph, my grandparents did the best they could to provide for me and my two siblings, but they were held back by what they lacked, generational wealth. Nothing was passed down to them, and they owned little themselves. This informed the way that they talked about money, the way that they talked to me about money, and the lessons I learned from them, which I would one day have to unlearn. My grandparents, who carried around credit card debt all their lives, placed a higher value on being able to provide for our family in the moment than putting that money away or investing it, such that their savings might grow over time and one day be able to provide for us in the future. Of course, we talk a lot about investing, with the Black Financial Channel, and the time value of money in terms of, how money goes when you're actually investing. She also led us into our life a little bit more with this paragraph. Growing up, we rarely talked about paychecks or savings or investing around the dinner table. Instead, we talked about God, family, and education, and how those things were able to provide for us. When it came to money, my grandparents believed credit cards could provide for all our basic needs, and indeed, I seem to be living proof of that. I needed clothes, food, and shelter, and these shiny pieces of plastic met those needs when my grandparents' monthly income couldn't. But her life started to change. Once she got married. So I believe she is in the LGBT community. In this article, it talked about how emotional it was when she realized that her money habits that she developed through her childhood and over her life didn't really align with what true wealth looked like. So Nakia states, my wife and I got married in 2011, but even when we were dating, we would talk about our credit card debt, mostly mine. The three credit cards I carried with over $15,000 in debt weighed us down figuratively and literally. For her, my credit card debt was the result of my family failing to educate me about making wise financial choices. I was angry when I first heard this, rushing to defend my upbringing and my family's choices. But as I grew to understand more about what it takes to build financial stability, I realized how my short term decisions about spending could have long term consequences, giving our growing family stability or robbing us of it. My wife and I started sitting down once a week to talk about our modest paychecks. We both worked in nonprofits. And eventually, her transformation ended, I guess, in terms of her thought transformation. What I began to come to understand as we kept up with our budget meetings is that I survived a system that was never meant for me to get ahead. And that's interesting that she also is talking about a system that wasn't meant for her. Because that is the same thing that brother Michael Ellison mentioned in the article before about tech companies in terms of the system and the system not really being meant for her or meant for him. So yeah, read this article. I find it interesting. You may be experiencing similar situation with your family or with your spouse, that type of thing. So I found this article today from Nakia to be very interesting, and I think you should read it. The next article comes from the Philadelphia Citizen, and it states big ideas for small business. So Drexel's Nowak Metro Finance Lab director is out with a Marshall Plan-like report for saving small businesses and investing in equity for Black and Brown entrepreneurs. Starts with a quote, or excuse me, what's this called? A stat. Employing 47% of the workforce. So small businesses are employing 47% of the workforce, generating two-thirds of new jobs, and serving as a critical path to economic self-sufficiency. One of the main, I guess, points in the main thesis of this article is the small business sector lies at the crossroads of four powerful forces: the devastation of COVID-19, a national reckoning with deep racial inequality, a long term trend of economic consolidation, and a degraded federal government. So this plan is called that the authors wrote is called Big Ideas for Small Business. Let me zoom in a little bit on this so you all can see it a little bit better. There we go. So it's released today. The report calls for additional emergency measures to stabilize small businesses, as well as systemic change in the way we give small businesses access to the capital, customers, and services that they need to succeed. Since February 2020, almost 25% of all U.S. small businesses have closed at least temporarily. In the hardest hit sectors like restaurants, hotels, and retail, the numbers are far higher. In September, Yelp reported that for businesses on its platform, 60% of the closures were permanent. Womply has estimated that 185,000 small businesses, one out of every seven, has shut down permanently by the end of August. So the article is a little bit broad, but its second point talks specifically about Black and Latinx companies. So it states, second, the impact on Black and Latinx owned businesses has been catastrophic. The most recent set of federal data, for example, reveals disturbing trends for Black owned small businesses. Because these firms are smaller, operate with less capital, and have less established banking relationships, they are also more likely to fold under economic pressure. Recently, the Federal Reserve of New York reported that from February to April, the number of active Black businesses declined by 41%. Later on in the article, he made some recommendations in regards to what needs to be done. So, come January 2021, the federal government must forcefully respond to COVID-19 crisis by providing debt relief and long-term loan products. Number two, the federal government, in partnership with states, can unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of the U.S. by reducing barriers to entry, leveling the playing field so small businesses can compete against incumbents, and giving entrepreneurs tools they need to succeed. The third thing that they mentioned, the federal government should shape a financial system that works for Main Street by strengthening independent banks and community financial institutions and expanding the range of federally backed debt and equity products available to entrepreneurs of all stripes. The fourth thing that they mentioned, to accelerate the growth of minority owned businesses, especially Black and Latinx owned businesses, we call for a dramatic expansion in both public and private procurement from minority owned small businesses. And the last thing that they recommend, we must collect more and better data on the performance of the small business sector generally, and specifically the impact of federal and new government programs so that we can evaluate for continuous improvement. So the article goes on a little bit longer, but I found it interesting for those aspiring entrepreneurs and people who want to understand the intersection of small business, entrepreneurship, and policy as well. The last article today it comes from the Huffington Post. The Huffington Post is actually owned by Verizon. I actually forgot that until reading this article. The article is entitled, Trump's Crackdown on Diversity Training is Fascist and Terrifying. The White House ban on anti-racism training is an authoritarian attack on free speech and already doing serious damage. And the article is written by Emily Peck. All right, so in an executive order in a series of administrative actions issued over the past month and a half, the Trump administration effectively banned diversity and inclusion training in the federal workforce and at any company or entity that contracts with the government or receives federal funding, a huge swath of American businesses and universities covering millions of workers and students. And this has been an ongoing thing, and it shows the difference between what President Trump says and what he actually does and what he actually believes as well, as it relates to his intersection and his commitment to the Black community. Kimberly Crenshaw is quoted throughout this article. She's a law professor at UCLA and Columbia Law School. And she states, this is far more serious than a lot of people think. This is no minor thing. This is an effort to put the weight of the federal government behind ideas that say anti-racism is racist itself. When a society is moving to authoritarianism, it goes after ideas. It goes after speech, Crenshaw added as a part of her quote. There's also a quote here from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who may get involved, and the quote's from Jin-Hee Lee, the fund's deputy director of litigation. This is an extraordinary and alarming act by a federal government and our president. The order is using the power of the federal government to essentially censor and police the actual thoughts and ideas and perspectives of not only the federal employees in the U.S. military, but also federal contractors that are private entities and grant recipients. It goes on to talk about the timeline of the attack, how diversity training has never really been radical, and also, the backlash, and talks a little bit more about critical race theory as well. But if this is something of interest to you, please go ahead and check this out on Huffington Post, so huffpost.com. And what do you think? Do you think that federal diversity training is a bad thing? Do you think that Donald Trump is doing something fascist by outlawing basically diversity training amongst the federal government? So that's it for today. Let me know what you thought about today's 5 articles. Also, before you get it here, please make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to the Financial Juneteenth channel if you would like more articles and more stories like the ones that were presented to you today. Also, let me know what you think about the Financial Juneteenth segment. Is this something that you would like for us to continue to do? We're doing about 3 more weeks of it, and we'll evaluate if it's something that we want to continue or try to do something else that will appeal to you and your needs to being a well-informed citizen as it relates to Black financial information. So on behalf of Financial Juneteenth, my name is Lawrence Watkins. Take care, be blessed, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.